Hi, everyone. Welcome to the February Community Hour. I can't believe it's already February. We're going to give it just a couple minutes, let some folks hop on, and then we will get started. Awesome. So while we let some more folks hop on, I'll go ahead and do the intro, and then we will go ahead and get kicked off and started, so we have plenty of time to go over all the content that we have today. Thank you all again for joining. My name is Jenny Norris, and I'm the Membership and Programs Coordinator for Converged User Group. If you're not familiar with Converged, or if this is your first community hour, welcome. What we do for Converged is our mission is really to connect users and prospects of Dell CI and HCI technologies and solutions with each other. We do this in a variety of different ways. So it's virtual programming like this one, virtual reality, or in-person events. We do this throughout the year to really network and share best practices and ideas amongst each other. So for today's event, we want to remind everyone to use the Q&A function, as well as ask questions in the chat box if you would like to ask anything to our speakers or contribute to the conversation. An additional note, I will be putting a survey at the end of the program today. If you fill that out, you'll be entered in to win a few prizes. That feedback is really valuable to us as a team to know what you want to hear in the future. So with all that being said, David, I will go ahead and pass that over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jenny, and welcome everybody. My name is David Giesica. I'm with the Converged User Group Board of Directors, and I run the program for Dell Technologies. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Firstly, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Dell Technologies, VMware, and Intel, for helping make this possible, helping us make this possible for you. All right, a little tongue twisting there. We've got a great topic today. It's a topic that's been top of mind from all of our member surveys since we started surveying about 3 years ago. We want to talk security. We've got a great team to do it. Joining me as my co-host is Adam Little from the Converged User Group Board of Directors. Adam is out at New Belgium Brewing in Fort Collins, Colorado. He is also the Enterprise Security and Compliance Manager. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Sure, David. Thanks for having us.
All right, great. I got you loud and clear. And our special guest to help us with this security conversation, Steve Kenniston, Senior Cybersecurity Consultant, Dell Technologies. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me. We're combining my two favorite things, security, technology, and beer.
Yeah, it's always fun, always fun. Well, fantastic. Folks, as we're getting started, please remember we do want to make this as interactive as possible. So use the chat or use the Q&A function to get involved with us. It's a big topic, it's a broad topic. We're gonna try and chunk it down to help you get started and set yourselves up for success. If you like this, let us know and we can do deeper dives as we go forward. But we'll just start right into it. Adam, you have established yourselves in security now, but you came there from infrastructure. Big picture, what are some lessons learned and some thoughts? How do you think about it in knowing your background and much the same as many of our members? What are some big picture lessons learned or nuggets that you can kick us off with as we get started?
Sure, yeah. I would say just a little bit of my background, as David alluded to. I was previously on the infrastructure team, and now I manage a team that does security for us. I think that's kind of been New Belgium's story, right? As we're just growing so fast that it's hard to catch up on some things, right? And I think everybody can kind of relate to that. Even if you don't have that same growth, it's always trying to do more with less, right? So I think a lot of folks are trying to understand how best to accomplish a baseline level of security for your business. I think that it's something that we always struggled with on the infrastructure side of trying to, it's much easier to be forward thinking with security, right? Plan it as not an afterthought, plan it as part of the process of deployment and how you're going to do those things, rather than trying to circle back around and look for downtime to change a configuration or isolate something. So that, for me, fortunately with my team, we've definitely had a security first mindset in everything that we're doing. And I think that moving to a lot of these Dell validated designs for solutions or security solutions, right, can really help you kind of answer that. How do we get there, right? It's tough to be like, we have some things we'd like to accomplish, but how do we, when is the right time to dive in, right? Is it a refresh? Is it a time where the business does have a little bit of downtime to plan those things out? So now circling back around to our sites, we went with VxRail as our solution that we standardized in our data centers and basically at our edge sites now, because we're starting to get into that of we need more capacity. So rather than buying more breweries, we kind of want to buy edge manufacturing sites where we can just add capacity. In those designs, right, not only do we not have boots on the ground, but we need a validated design that we can support remotely. So I think that's probably a good place to start, is when you're doing a refresh, right? Challenge your business to not just do more of the same, right? Even though it's a solution for us that is hyper-converged and easier to manage, it is an infrastructure team the opportunity to not say, hey, we haven't had time to test that. We haven't run it through UA and dev. We're not sure, right? Instead, you've got this validated solution from Dell that is tested and vetted for you that you can trust. Hey, I can do these updates. And then all of a sudden, the business doesn't need to be as concerned with us staying up to date or applying security patches. So I think Steve's got some good content on the other solutions, security-wise, that we can get into. But a security-first mindset, I guess, would be the first thing I could leave everyone with, of just try to make it not an afterthought. I know that's easier said than done in a lot of places and a lot of solutions, but partners can help you, right? Dell's helped us immensely with our journey.
Yeah, and you know,
sorry, David, go ahead.
Steve,
No,
well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, you've got a great kind of framework, so I'll hand it over to you to continue riffing on that.
Yeah, sure. I wanted to ask Adam, before you begin, right? As you go through the process of thinking, I like the security first mindset thinking that you guys have. As you think about it, where are you today? Where your organization today in their journey, and I don't even know how to ask the question. How secure do you think you are? Because I mean, that's a very open-ended question. But if you look at you know, kind of where you desire, where the organization desires to get to, where do you think you guys are today and on that path?
Yeah, for sure. I will say that, you know, it's I think my job it's unique and it's fun, right? I chose to work at a brewery, but the challenge for me is how secure can we be while it's still a fun place to work, right? I'm not trying to say, hey, like, we're not a bank. I'm not saying we're not a target, because everybody is a target, obviously, for security. But what is that balance, right, of coworker acceptance for regular security standards, and where does the business need us to be, right? For us, that's been very much a shift of, hey, like simple things like we can't use shared logins anymore. We need to really make sure that we're doing, you know, MFA on everything. We need to make sure that we're securing our edge. We need to, you know, there are all these different pieces that it's a constant battle with some of the folks that think we're still a small brewery, and it's like, we're not a small business anymore, right? We are gotten too big to say, hey, that's not an excuse anymore. So I would say we're pretty well along in our journey, but there's a lot I'd still like to accomplish. And then from my side, right, the team used to be very much a Swiss Army knife, where we could do a lot of different things. We didn't necessarily have like a network team, a storage team, you know, VMware team, where now we can't do that anymore. We need to specialize. We need to have those different teams. So that is kind of my initiative with my team, is to drive some of that stuff across the line. And then I give it up to my team the challenge of trying to say, sure, we want to move towards a zero trust model as an example. That's a big loaded statement, which means millions of different things to different businesses. But how do we get there, right? How do we get there and accomplish that in small little pieces, right? Where it's less impactful. People don't feel like, oh, okay, security turned this thing on and I can't do my job, right? That's the last thing you want to hear, for my team at least. So that's the real challenge, is trying to incorporate some of those things while not disrupting the business, right? While it's going 120 miles an hour, right? So
I'm really glad that you said that zero trust component, because I was trying to think of how do I weave that question in there. But since you brought it up, I think it's fantastic. I want to share something with everyone real quick. We'll just go to this real quick. When I have conversations with customers now, I'd like your kind of take after I kind of go through these things as to how they play a part or a role in kind of how you think about it. Because zero trust has been, as an example, zero trust has been this kind of word that everybody's kind of throwing around and what to do. And we're still at, I think, what we would consider maybe the second or third inning of this game when it comes to thinking about zero trust. But when I talk to customers who ask me, how did they begin or what does that journey look like? I say, before you think about it, technology that you want, have you looked at kind of these 5 key things to think about before doing that implementation, right? Have you done an assessment of your, like you were talking about, not a small company anymore, we are a big company. Do you really assess kind of where you are, what you have in place, what actually needs to be done, and what goals you need to achieve? Do you think about classifying the data in your environment, who has access to what, when, and that sort of thing? And that's really what zero trust is all about. From an educational perspective, like bringing all the employees along the line, like you said, like some folks still think we're a small company. Are we doing some education both for the employees as well as, I like what you said, from a technology perspective, right? We have to specialize now because things are getting a lot more sophisticated. And then as you start to come out of putting all these things in place, right? Ensuring that you have an incident response plan and ensuring that you practice the plan, because when we don't practice that plan, I always like to use the military example, right? They practice drills all the time in case something's going to happen, so that when something does happen, they're ready to respond. And everybody wants to be ready. There's always that time lag that happens. So I'm just kind of curious on, what are some of your thoughts about some of this?
yeah, I was going to say, the first 2 pieces I think are really important, right? I think the assessment and classification of your assets. One of the things that's the toughest for whether it's an infrastructure team or a security team is to kind of know what's out there, right? If you're growing at any pace, at some point it turns into, oh, we have some of this stuff here, we have some of that stuff there. Do we know we meant to turn that server off, but we haven't yet? Kind of getting an inventory of where you're at, right? And trying to pick and choose some tools. And that's where I thought really those 6 categories you have were great for at least just kind of a template of how to start your security journey. But I would, everybody, asset management is a challenge at a lot of companies, right? Of what's out there, what's that life cycle look like? And then kind of all of those pieces are very foundational once you get those right. So understand what your environment is, get your asset management right, understand your risky assets, understand your high level assets that need protected. I think we had a joke in there that was one of them put in the chat was about, MFA and PIN for e-beer, right? Or employee beer. It's ironic, right? Because that's I would love to have somebody show up and go, this is a ransomware event. Just give me some beer and I'll leave. That would be an easy out, right? Like, okay, here, the beer's easy. Let's take that and move on. But understanding what does that mean, right? So what is your company's IP? What is the thing that you should protect the most? Because there are certain things that it seems like even in our line of business, somebody would be like, well, what happens if somebody gets the recipe for Fat Tire? It's like, well, it's a weird situation because we gave away the recipe for Fat Tire at one point when we had other breweries make it and collaborate. So that's not really what our business needs to be concerned about. If I'm picking number 1, here's our most concern, it would be an internal compromise or something like that would force us from halting all of these automated systems that control brewing, that control getting things out the door. So that is our crown jewel, right? We need to make sure that the security and SCADA systems that run those systems, as we see in the news all the time, right? Those are generally the least patched systems. We need to do everything we can to secure that side of it. So that introspection to yourself of like, yeah, you've maybe got some servers that are out of date, and you make sure you don't have privileged access to them or something like that. But understanding what truly is recovery for your business, right? For the longest time, we had this challenge with portraying it to our business of, hey, if I can recover email somewhere else into the cloud and everything works, that doesn't matter. Who cares? We can email, right? For us, if we can't get beer out the door, it's irrelevant that we can communicate, right? So what is the plan for that, right? Could we brew somewhere else? Could we get those deliveries in a manual process out the door if you couldn't print a bill of lading or whatever went on those trucks? So all that to say that it feels like sometimes it's all on IT, but as you make a plan that's not necessarily just a BCDR plan, because forget a weather event or something that may or may not happen. What is your incident response plan? How do you lock things down if something goes wrong and keep the business running, right? What does that look like? What services do we need to recover first to get back to a steady state of what the business expects? And then also one of the things that doesn't get considered is what is that fail back plan, right? If you have manual processes, how do you get all that data back in to get it back to running as you expect? So as you work through that journey and define those services, like we've done in some of our recovery plans, we give criticality to those assets to understand like, hey, this is part of an ERP application. This is part of a CRM application. We would need to recover them first, what have you. You will learn that lots of times that recovery plan is not necessarily just IT. It could be, what does the manual process look like for those folks that are running the line? What does that manual process look like for finance and accounting if they had to do something else? So if you can get company buy-in to understand how important that is, which I know is always a challenge, but get somebody on your side, right? I think we've talked about this in some of our earlier sessions of the importance of IT pinning with other critical departments, right? Finance and accounting and understanding your business. You get that buy-in, it's good social credit, right? With the team, it's good building trust and understanding that and getting that plan for how you would recover. So I know it's a long process, but it can put you in a good light, and it shows to your leadership that you're very forward thinking of being prepared for what might happen.
Great. So as we move past kind of the initial thinking, where I sit down with organizations and they'd have some conversations about, just like you were talking about how am I kind of looking at my business and ensuring what I need to put in place. Well, the other thing that I just want to share, and I think you alluded to some of this, right? What we've been trying to do at Dell is ensure that across our infrastructure portfolio, that we have some of these key capabilities that you want to ensure that you have in your environment. So before, again, it's still a little bit before product, but these are some of the things that I think you want to ensure that you are implementing to ensure that you're creating this secure environment. So things like operational security, and those are really all the functions around like zero trust, like you were talking about, multi-factor authentication and that kind of thing. The ability to kind of identify and monitor what's going on in your environment and identify if something's come. Taking advantage of encryption. I mean, we all have it in all of our solutions, but are we turning it on, and why not? And thinking about those things. Back to the classification component that you talked about, when you do that recovery basis that you need, right? Do you have different tools that allow you or enable you to recover your data in such a way that the most important stuff is done first, so that you can get operational, so that you can be operational, you can get that beer out the door, right? And then when you store that data, when you backed it up or you're protecting it, is it isolated? Is it immutable? Is it air gapped, right? Are you ensure that it's protected? And how do you do that, right? And those are the crown jewels of the business. And then the last thing that I tend to talk about with clients, which I think is the harder piece, right? I think the first 5 are pretty, I don't want to say common sense, but they're people are thinking about those. The last thing to put in place actually goes with the last item that I had in the previous list around practicing, which is the automation and orchestration component, right? Anytime you can automate or orchestrate what you're doing, and you can put in practice or let technology do that work, because when an event happens, your hair's going to be on fire. And the first thing that's going to happen is human error, right? You're going to make a mistake, and then that's just going to delay your recovery time. What can you do to automate as much as you can so that the rest of the stuff in your IR process that you need to go through, you can actually handle pretty easily because you're not worried about 50 other things. And these are a lot of the components and capabilities. And then also back to what you said at the very beginning, right? Leverage a partner, right? So Dell has been working. We have our huge services organization that enables a lot of cyber recovery capabilities within an environment to help our customers should something actually happen. Did you have any thoughts on maybe some of these capabilities? I wouldn't even say a priority or prioritize them, but you guys get doing some of these things within your shop?
Absolutely. I think we have something that fits in every single one of these buckets. But yeah, I mean, as you're alluding to, right, I think this understanding the impacts, right, and understanding your business is super important to be aligned to that because what is most important to your business is a different answer for pretty much every business. I mean, there are some like-minded businesses with some overlap. Jonathan was asking a question or putting a comment in chat here. And so for us, it was even like, just because we're at a point, right, where we have multiple manufacturing sites, that doesn't mean that we can technically fulfill the same things, right? Do we need it to go to the East Coast? Do we need it to go to the West Coast? Can we bring it out of that site? So that has pushed back the business to kind of, it's a kind of a success story, right? Of that planning has really made the business be a little more forward thinking and aligning our sites and saying, hey, it's great that we have these different sites, but what if, right? And what if here, if we didn't have this, could we do that there? And kind of building that plan. But I think that all of those categories are great, right? Even people see that phrase, right, of SLA level recovery. Think about that as an internal business, right? It's not just a service level agreement with an outside vendor. It's your own RPOs and RTOs for your services and your applications. If you can recover those applications into the cloud, is that a viable option, right? In your planning, is that something that you can have at a different site? So obviously, tons of solutions, tons of partners to help you figure that out. And for us, maybe back to your point, Steve, of having a partner help you with some of those pieces. Sometimes when you ask from IT, it's tough. But if you could get some sort of an IR planning engagement, whether that's with Dell or a partner you work with, that can be super effective to have them talk to those lines of business, right? Because I just think back to the infrastructure days, you ask any application owner, what's the downtime your application can tolerate? They're all going to be like, it can't. And I need near time replication offsite. It's got, it's got to be gold plated, like it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's what I need. And when somebody else comes from the outside, they can say, okay, I hear you on that, but really, like, how much could you tolerate, right? Are there manual processes you could do for an hour? And then we hit a point where it's like, finance can't keep up getting these orders in anymore because we don't have our ERP up. So it can help you bring somebody as a partner in to get real answers to some of that so that you can properly plan that. Because the reality is, if people do this exercise, and ask me how I know, because we've done it many a times before we actually got some traction on this. If I just come to the business and ask for those answers, it always turns into, this is a giant quote, forget it, absolutely not, we're not going to do it. And then it doesn't happen, right? So you kind of need to work with your business and the way to kind of navigate that, to say, hey, I need real answers to this to build an actionable, real plan for cyber recovery.
And that's where I've found that a number of companies, not just Dell, but a number of companies, and this kind of goes to answering both those questions, which is, the first thing I talked about is do an assessment of your environment, right? You really need to do that honest assessment. And yeah, you're going to answer those questions and you're going to get answers like, oh yeah, no, I can't be without this data. It needs to be gold plated. It needs all this stuff. But the nice thing is once you take those assessments from the partner site, whether it be Dell or your business partner, or, I know a lot of folks have them, they're pretty independent. Typically they're created in conjunction with an analyst community, right? So their questions aren't kind of steering you to one of their solutions. It's more to get an understanding of what you have. And then when you find that, you find those gaps, right? And they can lead to things like, for example, the SLA-based recovery, right? That isn't so much about the product. It's partially about the architecture, right? I know companies that architect their backup environment to be able to back up a petabyte of data in an evening. Okay, that's great. So I can do that. That's easy to accomplish these days with dedupe and line speeds, et cetera. But can I recover the 2 terabyte database that I need in order to keep the business running, right? Maybe not. And that's really an architecture discussion. It's not about, can I get it 100% back? It's, can I get the most important stuff back? And how am I thinking about and looking at those things?
Yeah. And I got another piece I would add to this is exactly the way you were saying, Steve, is to not, look, I know we all have products. We all have products in the space that can accomplish that, but it doesn't need to be a situation where you're like, okay, where do I start? Give me a product sheet, right? It's a mindset of moving towards that and accomplishing those things. Like I said, as I dropped the phrase zero trust earlier, right? Zero trust is more of a mindset than a solution. Now there's a million companies that will tell you we've got a zero trust solution. And it's like, okay.
Well, there is zero trust company,
right? Right. Yeah. But there's not one size fits all for everyone. But moving towards that strategy, back to your point, without those foundational pieces that are above it, you can't answer that properly, right? If you don't have a good understanding of your assets, if you don't have a good app diagram of how they communicate and what services they're in, if you don't have a good way to recover them, you can't truly say that I can secure them well. So I believe rather in IT, a lot of times we get caught up in the churn, right? It's kind of a paralysis by analysis. Where do I start? And I guess I'm just trying to harp on here that a lot of that for us was internal planning first. It wasn't necessarily like go find a vendor or go find a partner that can help you. Now there will come a time where you need help from one of them for those to pick solutions and to pick different ways to get there and understand and talk to. One of the things that I think is the most valuable is outlets like this, right? In these sessions, we kind of hit at high level, right? But if you're at DTW, if you're at one of the events, like that's great. Talk to one of us in person about how we're doing it, how I would love to get in the weeds and have some of those conversations. So you don't have to figure it out all on your own, right? That's where a partner or just a community that's been through it can give you kind of lessons learned and say, hey, here are things we didn't think about till we tried it. And then I guess a big part of that is moving towards, once you feel like you have a decent strategy in place, is testing it and learning from it. It wasn't until we tried our first IR site recovery for some applications that those same application owners that were like, it's got to be gold plated, zero downtime, right? We're like, oh, shoot, I forgot about, we have this thing that it talks to, or it pulls this as part of the ETL and the reporting doesn't work if we don't have that thing. So testing it and iterating on that process, right, is I think standard for all of us, of take people at face value, but then let's try it. Let's verify it and make sure that it's getting everything we need. And then that can also show you, okay, this needs to be part of that app diagram. It needs to be part of that recovery group. It needs to be secured better so that I can say we're actually applying zero trust or RBAC roles to our ERP or whatever your goals would be, right? So I get the point is work with your business and understand those internal SLAs and try to build a plan from that.
Yeah, that's kind of where the practice, right, and the automation come into play, right? You practice it, you see what fails, what can you automate, what can you have, and then once the automation is on, test it, right? Make sure, like you said, LDAP comes up before my mail directory in order for it to work. Make sure that happens right, and then say, okay, this one's locked down. Okay, we know this one's good, right? I wanted to talk about a couple of things that are in the chat. Alan and Jonathan both brought up a couple of things that I actually think are really important. We talk a lot about in the security industry that, the skill. Everybody talks about the skills gap, right? And Alan talks about succession planning if someone unexpectedly leaves or that sort of thing, or even if a pandemic hits and you have to do things maybe remotely and maybe not everybody has all the right skills or that sort of thing. How do you guys think about that? I mean, we're so early, which I really like. We'll answer the question in a second. We're so early in this game of security, so to speak, right? And I like what you were talking about go to DTW. Let's get some more of these. I think we need to have a lot more of these community sessions, because that's where the real brain power and the good conversations start to happen. But how do you guys think about or leverage when, you know, the what ifs, when it comes to the people in the environment, like, because again, small skills gap, you know what you're doing today, someone gets hit by a bus, God forbid, what the hell happens now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's always a tough thing to answer, right? And I don't think there's an easy answer for every business. I feel like I'm very fortunate that I've worked a lot of places where people really do want to work there, and the company culture is good and it makes sense and the business is doing well. But to your point, right, those questions are always tough when the business isn't doing well, or when someone decides the pastures are greener and they move on. You know, a big part of that is kind of democratizing that knowledge, right? Making sure that there is not one person that knows everything and we cannot survive without that person. And I'll include myself in that. The other piece I was going to say on that is, I think I brought this up in one of our earlier security meetings or sessions with CONVERGED. So apologies if you've heard this sentence before, but there is definitely a shift in security as someone that's hiring security people away from policymakers to security doers, right? For me, it's important. I want to hire someone to join my team to help me do security that has a good infrastructure background, that has maybe a good cloud background, right? Because these services are ever changing. They need to be people that are willing to learn and deal with change, because as Steve alluded to, the reality is it's an ever changing space. There's a million different vendors in here. The attack vectors are constantly changing, right? So if you have someone that is not quite interested in that, but kind of interested in that, not willing to put in the work, that can be tough, right? To kind of pull them along. So I mentioned that to only bring it up to folks that are thinking about this, that are in infrastructure, that security could be something you've dabbled in. Kind of that was the same path for me, right? That I dabbled in security quite a bit with the places I've worked, and was sharing that responsibility before we had a dedicated team, and to pick up that skill set. Another piece is just to reiterate to the business, even your categories that you brought up earlier, Steve, a lot of them are outside of IT, training your personnel correctly, right? Making sure they understand phishing emails and things like that, risks to the business, limiting their access with some type of a zero trust. You know, so understanding and being able to convey to the business that this is important. It's not about taking away your access or making your job harder. It's about us limiting the risk, right? And that when you do those things, privileged identity management and privileged access management is a good example of how many domain admin tasks do you do all day, right? It is a risk to the business if my user has domain admin all the time, because if something happens to me, MFA gets compromised, something like that, they get my account credentials. Guess what? At New Belgium, I'm a generic user with no rights. So it's not going to get them anywhere. I know that's kind of down the road of understanding privileged identity management and getting those pieces going, but it's about quantifying that risk and then understanding how you can best address it with the folks. And then security keys, right? Back to the knowledge spread and making sure not one person is your go-to with all of these pieces. Put it back to your infrastructure teams, put it back to your leadership team saying, look, you see it, right? You read the news, you see all these headlines. We don't want our business in these headlines. And these are the things we need to do to get there. And some of them, many of them are not going to cost anything. They are just procedural changes in planning that we need to do, but they will cost people time. They will cost, solutions at some point if we want to accomplish some of these things. And then a big piece for me has been understanding your business and where it fits, right? Having, whether it's you need to do security assessments or NIST audits or something like that, or any of those pieces, what is acceptable risk to your business? How far are we going to go, right? I would wager to guess we are not going to go as far as Chase Bank is going to go for DLP as a brewery, right? And that's just, it's not going to make sense at some point, right? We are concerned about that, and we will make reasonable efforts to get to it. But like as a NIST category, we may never score 5 on DLP because we're just not going to do that. To the business, it doesn't make any sense, right? But there may be categories like site failover or site redundancy where it is critical to our business, and we need to have that in place. So that those conversations can help influence who can help champion you, and then who can help you on that track, right? There was a pretty good talk about this kind of more management and leadership essentials, but it is that agreement with who you're with in the business, right? Of like, when the table's closed, who's pounding the table for you to say, hey, we need to get this accomplished, right? Adam thinks this is important, and I know it's important. We need to accomplish this. So that is very important. And I think maybe everybody that's working in IT can understand that, whether that's getting the budget you need to accomplish things, getting that refresh done, getting those security goals accomplished. So have a plan, right? And try to start with a blueprint and lean on your partners and your experience to say, hey, here's a good first shot at it, right? It's not going to be perfect. We're going to have to iterate. We're going to have to adjust, but let's start. Let's not wait till next week or wait till next quarter when we have budget. Don't let that be the excuse. Start working on some of those pieces now.
I like two things. Well, first, I really like what you talked about the things that really don't cost money. I don't think they start out. The big reason why I start out with that list of the 5 things, right? And one of them is knowledge, is they tend to be things that don't cost money. Sitting and thinking and planning, other than people time, right, is virtually free, but it can really help you kind of in your decision-making process and kind of understanding your business a little bit better to ensure, like you said, we might not need to hit a DLP of 5 on the NIST scale, right? Because that isn't the most critical thing to what our business necessarily needs. But the other component that I thought is pretty important that doesn't cost money other than people time is the knowledge piece. And if you look at the Pokemon stuff from IBM from 2022, I think most all of the attacks are things like phishing or emails, or it's really about the employees having knowledge about what they should and shouldn't be doing, right? There's obviously the technical side on the back end that says, okay, we need to be resilient. We need to fix if something gets through, and something's probably going to get through. But how do we minimize what actually gets through? So, I mean, all super great points. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Adam, and I try to, in all my conversations when we're doing things, and like we said, we should probably be doing a little bit more of this community group conversation component. In your experience or in your career and tenure in security, without it being an obvious one, what do you think is your biggest aha moment? Like, what was something that said, oh, geez, had you put this in place, or this really saved us, or is there any experience you can share with us?
Yeah, not New Belgium, but I could say one of my previous employers. I'm going back maybe 10 years in my IT career when I was a young sysadmin working somewhere else. And the simple concept, right, of is one of your things on your list, air gap backups, right? Making sure that the data domain that we were backing up to at one of my previous employers was air gapped and segmented and locked down to the point where only, not truly air gapped, but ACL'd from the backup server. It was probably 5 years ago after I had left that they got nailed with ransomware. And one of my friends that I'm still colleagues at the time, friends with, said that was the only thing that saved them, was those air gap backups, that they could restore those servers. So that's just at the time, right? Yeah, it was a little annoying. It was a little more work for me to set it up that way. But, it's one of those pieces that it's a small thing, right? What was it, another maybe hour of my time to make sure it was on a different VLAN and it was segmented and ACLs were in place or what have you. But look at what that added up to. And I wasn't even there anymore. Right. So it's one of those pieces that it's a small, short-sighted decision, but it's starting originally with my own personal of like, here's the easiest way to accomplish it. I can just move on to the next thing, or I can take a little bit extra time and set it up a little better. Right. And if I hadn't done that, they would have kind of been in the world of hurt. And I don't say that to be like, I'm a martyr or look at me, I saved the day. Right. It just happened to be a weird idiosyncrasy of something that you took a little bit more time to consider, like, hey, I should do it this way. It's probably worth that time. Another piece I will say is, again, using now New Belgium as an example, that like phishing training element of it, right? The biggest risk to a business is generally phishing emails. For me, I would say an aha moment is like, we are very fortunate that New Belgium has like unsustainably low turnover I mean, it's like low 2% or something like that. Basically, people don't leave unless they retire, which is great. But I realize, man, I've been here for almost 8 years now, and we have trained the hell out of the same people on identifying phishing and emails and stuff like that. And we're fortunate that we don't have a ton of turnover, so they should really get it. They still don't get it, right? There are still people that you are like, I know this person in finance has been here for 10 years. She sharp as a tack, he sharp as a tack. They're not going to make this problem. They're not going to click on this email. It happens, right? You're not thinking you're in a rush. You're on your iPhone. You're
Having a bad day.
at the airport. You clicked on something you shouldn't have, right? So that to me is come to terms with the fact that we're all going to do the best we can, right? To train our end users, but have technologies, have solutions, have things in that space. You know, there are a million vendors in that space of email security, but understand how layers of those pieces can help you, right? Do you have a mail filter at the front? Do you have something real time that's scanning the email? Do you have something that's rewriting the URLs? Do you have something that can tell you when a user has clicked on that it sends that to a SIM or something like that your analyst can reach out and say, hey, did you mean to click on that? By the way, change your password now. And I just flagged it to be changed, right? I'm sorry that you're getting on a plane. You shouldn't have clicked on that. We've now limited that risk as fast as we can, right? So that is going from, yeah, we've got some email security to, boy, I hope it works. And I really hope they don't click on things to, nope, they're going to click on things. And when they do, this is going to happen. We're going to get alerted. We're going to reset their password, or maybe we automate it, right? We script it so that if they hit a certain security level, clicked on it, threat, logged in from a different location or something like that, unlikely login, it just automatically resets them and kicks them out of their sessions. So again, start with here's my first pass. Here's what I would like to accomplish. And then say, hey, in 6 months, in 3 months, instead of being nice about it, we're just going to automate changing it. And yeah, that's inconvenient for you to change your password, but here's why we have to do it, right? And explain it to the business. And more often than not, the end user will be accepting of that. We have that same policy even with our C-suite of like, we see something or we see you guys logging in from someplace you shouldn't, that's it. We're kicking out all your sessions, resetting your password, and we're going to reach out to you. So that's something that frankly we couldn't do till we had a team in place to do that, because you can't ask the infrastructure team to do that. They've got their own stuff to deal with. But a lot of those pieces in those chain were not my decisions, or maybe they were my decisions when I was on infrastructure, but they helped set up some of that scripting. They helped enable some of that alerting. They helped pipe those sources into the SIM so that you can see them. So again, security is a game of layers, right? It's not going to be a one size fits all for anyone, but get your plan and understand where your business can start making changes today. And I think for a lot of us, even myself, right, time is a factor. I would love to have more time to plan our incident response plans even better than they are now. But
I think you've given a lot of great advice, Adam. And just from a best practices standpoint, just to throw this up as we close, and then David, I'll go to you to ask if we've missed any questions, right? But just for folks watching, right, thinking about things around the best practices, right, enabling that encryption that you have, enabling multi-factor authentication, taking advantage of some of the things that are already inside some of the applications that you have without having to kind of reinvest in other things. This training, some of the free stuff that we say free, but obviously time-wise, but the things that folks need to understand and know about. Taking advantage of the big one is that gap that you talked about. We talk about the accidental air gap that happened with NotPetya for Maersk, right? The one system that was offline in Africa that happened to be because of a power outage. That was the only way they could get LDAP and back. I mean, it was amazing that helped them rebuild their environment. It still cost them hundreds of millions of dollars. What do you think about your vendor's supply chain, right? That's starting to come into play a lot more these days, right? And do they have a secure supply chain? And then where you can, as we talked, take advantage of that automation and orchestration, which can lead to better and more efficient practicing of your IR plan, which will help ensure that you can recover from many of these incidents that actually happens, and you're on top of things. So, I mean, Adam, this has been a great discussion. Are you going to DTW, by the way?
Yeah, I should be there.
I'd love to get together and have a beer with you.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things you were saying, right, vendor assessments, right, and understanding where they are. That's another piece that we don't often think about, right? It's not an easy fix, but I would say it's low hanging fruit of like, if you have, regardless of however your vendors do remote access to work on things, right? Understanding, do you have MFA on for those accounts? Because often that gets excluded because it's a shared account, or maybe it's vendor specific. We kind of implemented a policy that how many people would be working from X vendor at one time. Okay. And they all get one-to-one accounts, even if that is, Microsoft Support 1, Microsoft Support 2, Microsoft Support 3. I expect Support 1 is somebody that works in New York, and that's the only one that uses that account. Support 2 is someone that's in Colorado, and they only use that account. Support 3 is overseas, they're in Bangalore, and they're the only ones that connect to that account, right? So that I can at least just set a baseline for this is what expected logins for that account are. So, I mean, just little processes like that. And then as you move farther on that scale, we've gotten to the point where we do like a vendor risk assessment, where we ask them to send us their security audits and stuff like that before we do business with them. And then we also have a piece where we use a third party to leverage what their external security looks like, to say, hey, even though they've sent you this policy, are they patching their web servers? Are they using DMARC and DKIM on their emails? Do they have a good SPF record list? All of those little pieces. And I can tell you some of those conversations, you want to have tough conversations, try to talk to a distributor from Japan about their DMARC records. That can be an uphill battle, right? But it's truly getting to that point of where you have a security team or a security program, regardless of the folks you have, that's very high functioning when you get to a point where you're influencing your vendors and the people you work with to raise their bar of security, I think. So that's, maybe dream state for a lot of folks, but as you work on this, these are, simple changes that just need some planning and some action to get there.
David, I see we're at 45 minutes. Anything we should be thinking about or cover, or what are you thinking?
Well, you guys hit a lot of the stuff that was going on in chat. I took care of a question that popped up in the Q&A. Love the conversation. And, I think we've done this before where these could be 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours.
Yeah.
And I think really, it's February, it's the beginning of the calendar year. It's a great topic to get people thinking about these things. And like you said, Adam, don't wait until tomorrow to do it. Don't wait until the next quarter. You can start working with this into your stuff as you go every day. Pardon me. So what we'll do is there's been some requests for your slides, Steve. So we'll work with you to get those out to the members. I love the segue for DTW. It'd be great for folks to, if you're going to DTW, mark your calendar for Tuesday afternoon. We'll be doing that. Our annual Dell Technologies World meeting, and find people like Adam and have conversations. Steve, if you're there, we'd love to have you at the meeting. We really will set it up so that you guys can have a beer and continue these conversations. DTW is in May. Our meeting is going to be the 23rd of May at DTW. So mark your calendars for that and hope to see you guys there. Jenny, we're done. Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us. Adam, always great to co-host with you. And Steve, yeah, we can't wait to get in person with you and have a fat tire, a new formula fat tire, and see if we can get some more security conversations going. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Sounds great.
Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. Huge shout out to Steve and Adam for being our speakers. Y'all did an amazing job. I'd like to also do a shout out and thank our sponsors, Dell Technologies, VMware, and Intel. And as I mentioned earlier, I have included a link to a survey in the chat box. Your feedback is extremely helpful for us. So it only takes a couple minutes if you could fill that out. Once you complete the survey, like I stated earlier, you will be entered into a drawing for a prize. We have a lot of great events coming up, so be on the lookout in your email and on LinkedIn for additional information. Like David stated, we will be at DTW. We're very excited about that. Location to be determined. We have some really great things in the pipeline, and it's going to be a really great location. So a little sneak peek. But our community hour for next month will be March 30th. I have also included that link in the chat, so don't forget to sign up for that today. And if you enjoyed this program and enjoy being a Converged member, please share future events with your colleagues and friends. We would love to have them. So with all of that being said, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at other events. Bye,
Thanks all.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.